architecture in the Marais. And now I'm going to talk about a little about buildings outside of the Marais in the areas around that. So there are, let's say, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, where there are more buildings that you would think of as typically Parisian. 7 floors high, top floor is mansardé and might have little balconnets, or dormer windows, which would be old maids' rooms. And these buildings have balconies on the 2nd floor and on the 5th floor. The nicer ones would have a big porte cochère. A porte cochère, we'll put up a graphic, is big double doors which would allow in a horse-drawn coach. So therefore the word cochère, and bring the horse-drawn coach into the courtyard, where sometimes there might be an étable, which is a stable. And I've seen a few stables that have been converted into houses, and they're just gorgeous, very rare, beautiful. So you'll see more of those buildings. And those buildings, the main characteristics are, like I said, balcony on the 2nd floor and the 5th floor. Some of them will have an entresol. An entresol is between the ground floor and the 1st floor. So it's a little confusing. It's actually not the technically it's the 1st floor because it's the 1st floor after the ground floor, but you'll see that the ceiling, and I'll put up another graphic, the ceiling is very, very low because actually that space was used for the servants as storage. Then the 2nd floor with the balcony would be the étage noble, and this would be the where the family lived and received people. So the first 3 rooms facing the street would be the pièce de réception. Perhaps 2 would be living rooms and 1 would be a dining room. And the way to tell the difference, generally speaking, is that the dining room has wainscoting on the wall and parquet en point d'Hongrie on chevron. Living rooms would more likely have just straight planks of hardwood, almost always oak. However, in some of the really nice bourgeois old buildings, you'd have chevron parquet in all of the pièces de réception. So those would be 2 or 3 of those large rooms, high ceilings. The highest ceilings are on the 2nd floor, facing the street, have a fireplace on each end. I'll put up a graphic. And then the apartment sort of swings. It's like a U shape in a way because it's actually going around the stairwell on each side down the hallways. There'd be bedrooms, and then on one side in the back there would be a kitchen, which is where the maid would work, and a door leading to the servants' stairwell that goes up to the top floor. On the other side, at the end of the hallway, there'd be some bedrooms, and then maybe there'd be the bathroom. So that's the basic layout of a Haussmannian apartment. In the intervening years, since those were built, some of them have been split into 2. So you'll find 2 apartments on one floor because they're so massive. No one necessarily needs such large apartments. But that is the original layout. And so you have high ceilings, beautiful crown moldings, very elaborate, and the facades also would be on pierre de taille, so stone, and have some very beautiful, elaborate motifs, things that we don't build anymore, which is just sad, I think. So that is Haussmannien. Then there are other buildings that are also what we would say l'ancien, old, but the facades are a little bit boring. Maybe, they're called either Pierre de Paris or crépi, and basically it's stone or cement painted, and they're cute, but on the inside they have very charming apartments. You don't get the same ceiling height that you would in an Osmanian building, but on the other hand, they have parquet moldings, and fireplaces, and are absolutely charming, some of them. So, it doesn't have the sort of fancy facade, but they are, some of them are very, very charming. Then, and those buildings also tend to have smaller units, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, but not more than that. And some of them would have originally been built only with a kitchen and would have had a shared water closet, a WC, on the landing. But since then, most apartments are equipped with their own bathroom. But yeah, smaller apartments. And then there are, if you go out to the Beltway, so just inside the peripherique, just inside, there are a lot of these red brick buildings. They are old HLM, which is low-income housing, and a lot of Parisians would sort of not want to be in a red brick building because they think of them as low-income housing, but they're not anymore. And I've been in many of them, and they have beautiful apartments. So those are sort of around the Beltway. And Paris is a defined space, like geographically, but it is also defined in height. It can only go up 7 stories. So it's not like New York or London or Japan, where they have different city ordinances, and they can just sort of decide, like, well, we're gonna provide more housing by building higher buildings. That doesn't happen in Paris. So most of Paris is 7 stories high. There are some very horrible exceptions to that. I mean, I don't know what the Tour de Montparnasse is about. And then there's some random high rises here and there. I don't understand it. But I can say that I've never had a client who's wanted to live in one. And you might get a great view of Paris. You probably will get a great view of Paris. But no one really wants to live in those. And so Paris is basically 7 stories high, which means that the number of residential square meters is limited, very limited. And then there's the number of commercial square meters, which is also very limited. Paris wants to keep those as low as possible. They're capped in every arrondissement. And they will, because they want to keep neighborhoods residential and not have it turn into just offices who can afford the rent. So that is a great policy of Paris. So that's for the buildings around the périph'. The other types of architecture, once we get past Haussmannien, are Art Nouveau and Art Déco. So Art Nouveau is, I think, Alphonse Mucha, who did those wonderful posters for Sandra Bernard. Very sensual, curvy, natural in the sense of flowers, and I'll put up a graphic of one of the most famous Art Nouveau buildings in Paris. Absolutely gorgeous. And the apartments inside would also have some pretty nice elaborate moldings, parquet, fireplaces, etc. And then there's Art Déco. So that Art Nouveau is like 1910, 1920s. Art Nouveau is 1930s. I'm sorry, Art Déco is 1930s, and those buildings, almost all of them, would be built with an elevator because that technology existed at the time. So almost all of the Art Déco buildings have been built with elevators. And an Art Deco building is very easy to spot. They have very geometric motifs. The doors are, generally speaking, black wrought iron with a sort of diamonds. Is that a diamond? Motifs, and there are some other architectural features that are very recognizable just from the outside of the building. The good thing about Art Deco is that they're very solid. When you go down to the foundation, I mean, they're like top. And they have common, collective heat. Those are probably the first buildings to have a major boiler in the basement. And however, the inside of the apartments, they're a bit sober. They have a fireplace and parquet, but there's no moldings. They're sort of like where the wall meets the ceiling is just kind of curved, so it's like, it's nice. It's not super fancy, but I mean, it's there's still some magnificent units. But it was the style of Art Deco, to be sort of a little bit more minimalist, more geometric, and those buildings are also beautiful, very much in demand. Then there was the war, and after the war, the architecture from the 1950s and the 1960s, very nice buildings, pierre de taille. Very solid, classy, big lobbies, big elevators, and spacious apartments, sometimes fireplaces, parquet. It depends what you're looking for, but some people, they think they want the sort of the Parisian charm, but then they feel like, I'm not really used to something so old, and then they walk into a 50s or 60s building and they think like, okay, this I feel more at ease with. It feels more modern, but it's still old and pretty. And then there's the 1970s, which nobody wants. Like, the exterior facades are just pretty horrendous. And sometimes the apartments inside are, some people have done some amazing renovations, and you can see some gorgeous apartments. And it's true that you don't have to, while you're inside your apartment, look at the facade, but you do have to come home to it. And so I don't get a lot of people asking for 1970s. And then that brings us to the 80s and 90s. 80s and 90s, boring, cement, bit utilitarian. They're okay. They're boring. And then to the 2000s. The 2000s, architecture was really influenced by government policies to be ecologically friendly and energy efficient. So in that sense, there are some nice ones. They're very expensive. Per square meter compared to an older building. I don't know if that's offset by the energy efficiency. I doubt it. But they're expensive. And new builds are very expensive. Not sure why. The facades are interesting. I can put up a few examples. They're interesting, but they, I think in 10 or 20 years, they're just going to be dirty and boring. And it's a shame, because Paris is full of gorgeous buildings, and why they don't make an effort anymore, really, to make things just aesthetically pleasing. So anyway, that's a kind of a rundown on different apartments and different types of buildings in Paris. I will post the timeline, which shows a lot more about how different layouts in these buildings over the centuries reflect on how people lived at the time, which I think is fascinating. And that's it for today. Tomorrow we'll talk about or maybe the next day. I'm not sure. We'll see how things go. Talk about this price per square meter, which is a great benchmark. It's a very good reference, but it is not the bottom line. It's not the end all reference. Every square meter is not created equally, is what I want to say. So anyway, over and out. See you tomorrow. Have a great one.